Hello, everyone. I'm George Christie with the Wine Industry Network, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 6 of the WIND Educational Webinar Series. Today's episode, where cannabis and wine meet, is about cannabis-infused wine, how you make it, how you market it, where you can sell it, where you can buy it. We're going to top it off with a real-life experience when launching a cannabis-infused wine and all you have to go through. So the session was originally created for the Wine and Weed Symposium, which was scheduled for August. It was our fourth one, and like a lot of events scheduled this summer, we had to cancel as a result of the COVID-19 crisis. But there were a few sessions like this one that we felt like we wanted to proceed with and launch virtually. The reason we selected this particular topic was simply because it was a question that had come up from the first time we launched the Wine and Weed Symposium 4 years ago. Unfortunately, 4 years ago, there really weren't any legal ways to do a cannabis-infused wine. No one was doing it, at least legally, that we could talk about. But a lot's changed since then. So here we are. I'd like to begin by introducing our panel and having them tell you a little bit about themselves, their background, and the role that they or their company play in producing a cannabis-infused beverage, and of course, wine in particular. So why don't we start with our first panelist, Austin Stevenson, who's the Chief Innovation Officer for Vertosa. Welcome, Austin.
Hey, George. Thanks for having me.
Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Vertosa and what you guys do.
Yeah, I appreciate being here and on this panel with my excellent peers and colleagues. My name is Austin Stevenson. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer at Vertosa, where it's really our focus to unlock the potential of cannabinoids by transforming extracts into compatible, reliable, and stable ingredients that are easy to infuse into all types of products, whether it be wines, sodas, soft drinks, confections, supplements. We really specialize on creating a stable ingredient that spans the breadth of the infused category. Before Vertosa, myself, I was the business unit manager at Eurofins Scientific, a worldwide analytical chemistry laboratory where I ran the hemp and CBD business unit. So while at Eurofins, I saw the problems in the infused space, really kind of saw the good, the bad, the ugly of all types of hemp and CBD products. And one in particular was beverages. Many beverages that were coming across my laboratory were incompatible, not stable. They just weren't passing potency tests. So when the opportunity came to build this company, Vertosa, where we focus on stability, I saw an opportunity to really level up the infused category with our technologies. And now, over a couple of years that we've been doing this, we've got to work with excellent beverage and wine manufacturers like Tracy at House of Saka and teams like Aaron at Bev Zeros to really create amazing beverages and infused products as a whole. So I'm grateful to be here and happy to kind of support this entire industry and network that we're building together.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being here. Our second panelist, Evan Edelman, who is the founder of Fiorello, Sands Lane and Ello. Evan, welcome.
Thank you, George. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. So my name is Evan Edelman, founder of Fiorello Agency. And what we do is we help companies and operators build purpose-driven brands. And really what that means is helping companies identify the intersection of brand, cultural, consumer, and category insights. The brand purpose is really integral to the foundation of a brand architecture. And that architecture is really the backbone for a strong and sustainable brand, one that enables effective commercialized revenue-generating marketing, content, and communication strategies. It's critical when you're getting into a market to think about how you're designing that brand, who you're designing it for, how you're designing it for them, the partners that you use, such as our esteemed colleagues on this panel, and ultimately launching a brand like what Tracy has done with House of Saka takes a lot of time and effort to get to market. And then once you're in market, help to continue to build engagement around that with the consumers that you're targeting. So we work with companies very specifically in the infused beverage space. We also work with companies throughout the cannabis and hemp industry as well, and use those insights to help support the category specifically, which we've been very excited about for a long time. I can actually thank Aaron, one of our panelists, for really getting me more involved thinking about this almost 2 years ago now. And we're a really strong supporter for the ability to have a more approachable social consumption mechanism that people are used to. So thank you again for having me, and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for being here. Aaron Silverstein, who's the managing director for BevZero. Aaron, welcome.
Thanks for having me, George. So I lead BevZero, and our focus is primarily just creating quality non-alcoholic wines in the United States, and not just for cannabis infusion, but for the regular market as well. It's all about how do we preserve the actual aroma and flavor of wine as we're doing this. And about 3 years back, it's been 2 years now, we started really seeing the opportunity with cannabis and hemp-infused wines and really working in that industry. And we found amazing partners to work with, like Tracy at House of Saka and Austin at Vertosa. And we found that it's something we really have to work together as a community almost to build the best possible products and really start this category. And something we're very honored to be a part of.
Good. Well, welcome. And last but certainly not least, we have Tracy Mason, who's the CEO of House of Saka. Tracy, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So tell me a little bit about your background, Tracy, and a little bit about House of Saka.
I spent about 30 years in the wine and spirits industry, largely in marketing, sales, and probably the last 2 decades of those 30 years, I was in innovation, so new product development. So I'm pretty well versed in the wine industry. I know a lot about it, and I entered into the cannabis space about 2.5 years ago when I was tapped to take on this role as co-founder and CEO of House of Saka, which is the world's first and only cannabis-infused alcohol-removed wine from Napa Valley. So it has been quite a road, and had it not been for partners like Vertosa and BevZero, I don't know that we could have gotten where we have been. And I will say that it's not for the faint of heart. It's a very, very difficult supply chain to assemble. It's a difficult supply chain to continue to hold together because regulations change every day. Players come in, players come out. But nonetheless, when you can rely so heavily on your key partners, like our infusion partners, our alcohol removal partners, that at least is one side of the business that we can rely on to help us build our business. So that's really where we're sitting right now. We launched House of Saka officially last fall, and it's doing quite well in the marketplace. And going back to sort of what Evan was saying, what it does is it allows consumers a way to kind of enter the space in a very safe and social manner. So it's so precisely dosed, and the onset effects come on so quickly, you can really get a read on how much THC really works for you and how much doesn't, as opposed to waiting 2 hours for an edible to hit your system and figure out, oh gosh, I'm way too stoned, I don't want to feel this way anymore. So it's that, and it's what we're hoping to is really to have a foothold in both the luxury space in the cannabis industry. We're really talking to kind of curious, particularly females that are curious about the space, and kind of destigmatizing the category in a way that we're bringing the social element, as Evan mentioned, into cannabis consumption. I mean, you can bring a bottle of sake anywhere, and no one's gonna, if you light up a joint somewhere, that could be a problem.
Right. Well, thanks, Tracy. That's great. There's a bunch of things that you mentioned that I'm going to come back and we're going to dive in a little bit deeper on that. But one of the things that was really cool when we started these, the discussions around putting this session together was how closely you guys all work together already, right? So for me as a moderator, that was nice, right? You guys already have these relationships, and I think that's going to come through as we go through this session. But I want to kind of take it all the way back for those folks that may not be familiar at all with the process. Walk me through kind of the basic process of making a cannabis infused wine. I guess starting with you've got wine that you want to infuse, right? And you've got to start with, I guess, removing. I guess I'm not necessarily sure where you start, but I want to let you guys take it from there. Aaron, do you want to maybe jump in, or Austin?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the very first thing we have to do in order to make a legally compliant product in California is to remove that alcohol. like you're saying. And it's half science, half art to us, because as we're removing that, there's questions of how do you want to build back the mouthfeel of your wine? What exactly kind of wine do you want to do? It's a massive difference depending on what kind of wine I'm starting with to remove the alcohol. And we found where it gets really fascinating is that everything's almost an interplay altogether, because as we're trying to build back those components or select the wine, we need to have Austin's involvement almost, because what kind of infusion I'm using, what sort of surfactants that are stabilizing the emulsion, they have impacts on flavor profile, everything. We'll let Austin dive into it more, but it all goes hand in hand.
Okay.
Yeah, so making an infused wine involves, as Aaron said, a lot of variables and complexity. In terms of the infusion part, actually, getting active cannabinoids, whether it be THC, CBD, or some minor cannabinoid like THCV or CBN or CBG, it requires starting with the plant and extracting the cannabis oils from the plant. And so there's many different processes of extraction. There's CO2, there's ethanol, BHO, and others. But then once you get that cannabis oil, you have got to get it into a wine beverage. And as we all know, oil and water just do not mix, right? And so you got to take it through a process to make the oil compatible with water. And that's what we do at Vertosa. We use advanced infusion technology to create something that's very hydrophobic, oil, and turn it into a water-based product. I like to say, in sales calls all the time, we turn oil into water. That's what we do. And that process is there's a few different technologies that you can do. And we employ, just that, a few different technologies. You can use sonication, which is high energy. So you're basically taking the oil, you're applying energy and emulsifiers to create a water-compatible beverage or ingredient. Those emulsifiers that Aaron was alluding to are very common in food and beverage today. The most common emulsifier that you'll see every single day if you look in your pantry or look in your refrigerator is lecithin. It's the common application in salad dressing or in ice creams. And so that really just makes oil suspend evenly throughout a beverage. So we use different emulsifiers and energy to create an emulsion that's infused in the wine. Other processes include high pressure, same sort of application. It's pressure or energy, taking something really, really big, making it really, really small, encapsulating it, and putting it into a wine.
Okay.
And the benefit of all of this, as Tracy was saying, is that you're creating a cannabis experience that is analogous to a traditional wine experience. That you're feeling the onset of the active quickly, 10 to 15 minutes. When you have a normal glass of wine, you want to sip it, you start to feel the effects of alcohol within 15 minutes, you enjoy it over an hour and a half, and then it goes away.
Right.
Traditionally, cannabis-infused products, I think it was Snoop Dogg that actually had the quote that was pretty popular that there's no off switch to edibles, right? So people are a little bit fearful of edibles. So we changed all that through our process. We first, by taking the emulsions, making them fast acting, we accelerated the onset of the cannabis experience to, instead of waiting for an hour or 2 hours like you probably did in college when you had that brownie, instead you get the feeling in 10 to 15 minutes. And then it starts to, you go up and then it comes down in like an hour and a half. So, through that process, you're creating a whole new cannabis experience. And then it's really, the brand and the winemakers that create the differentiation through the different varietals they use, the different flavor profiles, and that makes it even more unique. And that's kind of the step that's after us. And that goes to the co-manufacturer and back to Aaron and the Bev Zero team, Tracy and the House of Sake, and really designing the varietals and the SKUs that they want to deliver to consumers.
So Tracy, this question's for you. So let's say, you finish your work with Aaron, right? You've got your wine is now de-alked. Do you sit with Austin and basically almost like a blending trial where you're trying different emulsions? Is that the right term? Different emulsions just to get the flavor profile that you're looking for. Is that sort of the right steps there?
Yeah, there's a couple of steps with it. I mean, first is choosing the right base wine to work with.
Right.
So you want to choose a wine that has a type of essences and weight on the palate that once it's removed, that you can still have some of that left once the alcohol is removed, because alcohol is an essential part of wine. Think about it, it's between 12 and 16% of wine. So that's a big thing. So your palate accepts alcohol in two really key ways. One, it's weight on your palate. Two is it's you detect it as sweetness. Alcohol comes off as sweet. So when you remove that, you're essentially creating, a very very acidic and not sweet at all product, very dry. Mm-hmm. And so knowing where you're starting, and then removing the alcohol, and then constantly going back to the original wine and trying to build those flavor compounds back with natural extracts and concentrates is where we kind of start. And then, because every single wine and every vintage is different, we have to work with Vertosa to find the right emulsion for that specific wine. So it's not as though we have a recipe that says, okay, you take 2 parts this and then we can't do that, because there's different proteins, different tannins that are in every different vintage. Even if it's from the same winery in the same vineyard, it doesn't matter. So first we start with the base wine. We remove the alcohol, we build back the flavor compounds, and then we trial those against different emulsions that Vertosa is able to provide to us, looking for both flavor compounds that marry to what it is that we're trying to achieve, and also the stability that we're trying to achieve, because again, they'll react differently to different proteins. So for example, Saka Pink, which we had the first vintage, was released in November of last year. Our second vintage, which will be released in, I think it's being bottled on the 30th, is a whole different one. It's very different. It's got a different emulsion. I would argue an even better emulsion. And so, yeah, so it's a lot of trial. It's a lot of tasting, which makes for some fun afternoons. But it's a really difficult thing to get right. And so that's what I meant when I said, it's not for the faint of heart. To do a really good cannabis-infused beverage, particularly one that starts off with an alcohol-removed wine, which is already challenging. To do a really good infused beverage made with alcohol-removed wine as your base is very, very hard to do. But we have so much expertise on our team at Saka. I mean, between myself, our COO, spent 30 years at Constellation in ops there, and finance. So we have a tremendous amount of experience, which I think it sets us apart. And I also think our Napa Valley Provenance, since we're starting with such good wine, also helps kind of ladder us up versus our competitive set.
Yeah. So you made me think of something. So having, gone through a lot of different trial tastings, and, whether it's, your blending trials or your competitive tasting, you're sitting around a table and maybe you're going through 10 or 20 or 30 wines and you're, spitting, but you're still sort of catching, it's hard to go through that all day without catching a little bit of a buzz, especially those early morning ones. Is it the same thing when you're doing cannabis infused wine? Is it, are you spitting but is that sort of help you get through the day, or is it different than wine?
It's very similar. I mean, it's not like you're walking out of a blending session and you're running to McDonald's because you have munchies. It's much more mellow than that. And I think, the high that you get from cannabis-infused beverages, particularly from House of Sake, is kind of a very sensual, relaxed high, because there is a CBD component to our emulsion. So there's THC and CBD. Okay. So every serving of Saka Pink currently has 5 milligrams of THC and 1 milligram of CBD. Okay. So our next vintage will have higher dose of THC. But it makes for really fun mornings for sure. But it's not, I would never say that I'm walking out again with a beeline to McDonald's.
That's so funny. Okay, so now, Evan, we've got a finished product, right? We're ready to bring it to market, and I guess that's where where your expertise really comes in. Talk a little bit about the marketing and selling of a cannabis-infused beverage, wine in particular, versus what we traditionally do on the wine side.
Yeah, I mean, so what's interesting about this conversation and thinking about bringing a product or brand to market, all the comments that were just made are actually very integral to the brand development process, even before you get to market.
Right.
Anytime you're developing a new product, and I'm sure Tracy can talk about the many years of innovation in the wine industry, you're thinking about your provenance, your varietals, and how you want that consumer to interact with a finer wine or a $2 chuck. Those are distinctions that you're going to make fairly on in the process. And we do the same thing with an infused beverage, infused wine beverage. And also that consumer, are you bringing over a current wine consumer versus a new entrant into possibly both wine and cannabis? And those are all decisions that are made. And the great thing about a brand is that it is something that grows and develops over time. I mean, it's just the same way that we are as humans. We think about things, we plan, we get into market, and then we reevaluate and hopefully adjust for the better. So when we get to the point where we have a finished product, we've done a lot of the brand work up front, which should really define that marketing approach and how we're going to get into trade. The biggest difference right now, and I am not a wine industry expert at all, but I will let the experts speak to it, is that we don't have a real supply chain in the way that you do in wine or other beverages. The retail outlet, the on-premise consumption, those are two things that are very different than your traditional beverage, whether it's wine or other alcoholic beverages or beers. It's a challenge now to get to the end consumer. So when we're thinking about the marketing and sales tactics and how do we get to trade, there are similarities. Most retailers do not focus on beverage as you would normally see in wine or other beverage categories. So there's a lot of education. There's a lot of developing the materials that retailers or other retail type partners can begin to educate consumers. Mm-hmm. Part of that, again, is going to be specific to the region. If you're trying to approach a Southern California consumer versus a Northern California consumer, there are differences in preferences of just wine in general, and therefore an infused wine product. And the strategies are going to be applied whether it's through a retailer or communicating to a consumer directly. And that is changing rapidly. Right. This group on this call, who's also part of the Cannabis Beverages Association, is a big part of developing the supply chain for cannabis-infused beverages or hemp-infused beverages, depending on what market you're in, because we need a lot of help. The industry needs a lot of help. The distribution side is not robust and built out. So, we're taking tactics that Tracy's used for 30 years and bring it into the cannabis space, and Aaron's used to de-alcohol wine for many years at Zero. So it is evolving. What I could say is that the organic side of marketing, organic, just the way we communicate to consumers, is still the strongest channel right now, which is the word of mouth. If I'm going to sit down and have a glass of House of Sake in an afternoon and have that experience, have that very nice mellow onset, I'm going to tell all of my friends who are maybe stressed at the end of the day of both working and watching their kids at the same time. And what do they want to do? They want to be able to unwind a little bit. And me telling a friend is much more powerful than an advertisement that they're going to see, which in our industry, you almost can't even see that anyway.
Right.
Not dissimilar to some alcohol advertising restrictions, but cannabis is even harder. So a lot of challenges. These are things that we work with our clients and brands and partners to really think about up front, because it's not something easy and you can't just throw money at it. You can certainly push as much as you can through the sales side, but the consumer isn't necessarily getting that messaging or getting them the way that you want them to as a brand. So it's a bit trial and error. Yep. It's probably a good way to say it. I'm sure Tracy can give you tons of experience around that. But yeah, it is, it is important up front in the development of the product to think about how you're going to educate trade on what this product even is, who your consumers may be, understand if they have those consumers coming into their retail location. And if not, a question that I'm sure we'll get into is, well, how do we get directly to those consumers?
Right.
Do we have a wine club model that we can use and get direct to consumer? And again, a lot of those things are being developed. Everyone on this call is a big part of that development and excited to be part of that.
Is there and Tracy, if you want to jump in on this, a direct consumer opportunity? I mean, does House of Saka have a wine club? Can you do a shipment like you can wine, or does it have to go through a dispensary? How does that work?
It does currently have to go through a dispensary.
Okay.
You can get distro licenses, which is something we will do with our next round of fundraising. But we really believe, as a brand, House of Saka, the brand itself, is something that we've taken such care to develop as a brand. It's a real thing. The label is beautiful. The opaque packaging that we have to have, the child-resistant cap that we have to have.
Yeah.
All of this took tremendous work to get to. But, having a brand with authenticity, House of Saka really is an ancient group of female warriors that were said to rule the world and conquer all they desired. So for us, a company that's really run by women and for women, it's really an authentic brand. And so, we have a lot to say about the brand itself. And so when we were really looking at our sales strategy, we knew from the very, very onset that we were going to focus very, very clearly on delivery platforms. Mm-hmm. And so understanding that our target consumer is used to that means of shopping. So shopping online, whether they're going to Amazon or going to Nordstrom.com or whatever, it's a really comfortable sales channel for our target consumer. And it keeps them from having to necessarily go into a dispensary, which can be intimidating, I think, for a lot of people. I personally love it. It's like going into a candy store, but certain people just don't prefer that. So our biggest sales channels right now are our delivery platforms that you order directly from our website, and it's done through a third party. Largely Ganja Runner is our biggest supply partner in that regard. And so you can just go to our website. You can order it from our website, and it'll be delivered to your door within 24 hours. The wine club model is something that we're actively working on only because our consumers have asked us for it.
Of course.
So it's something that we're working with our delivery platforms to make happen. Brick and mortar is also obviously a really important part of our sales strategy, but we're being very selective and very highly procured in how we want to and where we want to have Saka be sold, because we don't want it to be in an environment where it wouldn't sell. So, we're looking at, the 620 dispensaries in the state of California to date, really to achieve our business plan, we only need to be in less than half of those.
Okay.
Because the velocity from the right stores is going to be more meaningful. It's better to, and then we can focus our spending, to Evan's point, because we can do so little relative to marketing. If we live in our stores, we can really go deep with them in terms of promotional spending, educational spending, and all of those things. In addition, we're about to kick off a new program called, it's a whole digitalized program called Know Your Dose, and it's all about how cannabis-infused beverages, specifically House of Saka, will allow consumers to really understand their proper dose. Mm-hmm. In ways that any other form of cannabis cannot, because you just simply, you don't know how much you're consuming when you take a puff of a joint. You don't know how much you're consuming when you take a hit off a vape pen. You just don't know.
Right.
And even standard edibles, the cannabinoid changes when it goes through your liver and becomes more potent. So it's not even like you're consuming 10 milligrams, you know what that feels like 2 hours later. It's also a different cannabinoid. Yep. So there's a lot of meat on the bone, but to Evan's point, getting that meat in front and on the plate of the consumer is challenging. And so we have to work really closely with our dispensary partners or delivery partners to make that happen.
Yep. So a core strategy on the wine side, when you're trying to generate and raise some awareness for a new brand or a new product within a brand set, in-store tastings. So are you able to do like in-store tastings at some of these dispensaries, or is that something that you're not able to do as well?
Well, certainly that was a big part of our model pre-COVID-19. We can taste real product. We can taste infused product, but we can taste our non-infused alcohol removed wines.
Gotcha.
So we can do that. And again, events are really important, pre-19, were a really important part of our strategy as well. Being present at places like Emerald Cup and at, those types of events were really important to us. And then also looking at consumption lounges, which again, given our current environment, is a challenging one. So we've had to really pivot very quickly and manage our funds really closely too, to make all of this happen. And it was already a complicated environment before COVID-19,
Right.
relative to how we're going to talk to that consumer and where we can meet them, at their pace. But now it's even more difficult.
Yeah. Well, hopefully things start to get back to normal at some time in the not too distant future.
I'd like to jump in on one point that Tracy was making around the direct-to-consumer channel and the third-party distribution. So unlike alcohol, we don't have a three-tier system. So in the infused beverage space, you potentially could control the entire vertical supply chain. And in traditional wine, almost all don't do that. In infused beverages, there are certain operators that do. Certainly the larger ones. Smaller brands don't generally have the funding or the resources to do so. So you are very heavily reliant on third parties as part of this process. With that said, we are seeing ways for brands to get direct to consumer, which is really somewhat indirect to consumer,
Right.
and building what would be similar to a subscription model. The margins and the financial side of that is a little bit more challenging because of the number of partners that you have to interact with to get there. But it is a model that is coming together today. One of the challenges is you may not have enough SKUs or vintages to actually even make that interesting for a consumer yet. So you're trying to get people engaged and interested without trial. To Tracy's point, we don't have the ability to do that in person, especially in retail. But we can do that in getting people interested in a subscription box, in something that is direct to consumer, a subscription model, or something direct to consumer as a wine club might be. That is forming now. So if we're thinking about entering the space, other interested parties, these are things that we work on designing as part of the process. So Tracy mentioned very specifically when they were thinking about launching, delivery was a big part of that. So was retail, in the sense that we wanted to keep that limited to the right demographics, regions, whatever it is, to go deeper with those retailers and really get some feedback to the extent we can. But there's no better feedback than going direct. And there are ways of doing that. It's a little clunky,
Right.
but you can certainly do so now. And I think it's very helpful for brands to think about it, especially in a COVID-19 environment, which will seemingly have some cyclicality to being able to go out and interact in the public, and also have to stay back home as things kind of peak in different areas. So it's no different than other industries. However, this one is already challenging. Add on top of that, COVID-19 and other issues going on socially in our environment today. And it's not an easy road. It's a very challenging, but it is a fun and rewarding road to travel.
Well, I imagine still, especially when you're at the forefront of the front of the parade here, right? It's always the pioneers that usually have the most challenging time versus the folks that come up behind. But you talked a little bit about the category, I guess, people having more choices, right? And I think when I think about the wine industry and the wine consumer, the more confident that they get with knowing what they like versus what they don't like, the less they want to drink the same thing every day, right? They want to experiment. They want to try different wines. And so I could see that same thing happening in this particular category. So, Aaron, Austin, I'll throw this at you two. Are you seeing more curiosity coming from not just infused beverage, but I guess maybe talk about not just infused wine, but infused beverage in general, and then wine more specifically? What are you guys, seeing out there?
Austin, why don't you take this one to start?
Yeah, no, I mean, curiosity is what really drives me every single day to work with our partners across the entire supply chain. I think that some of the silver linings that, COVID has produced is more curiosity around ingestibles. And the reason why, your traditional cannabis consumer, having this smokable, traditional flowers, smokables or inhalable vape, they're really concerned around respiratory health. They also are seeing a lot of the benefit in terms of stress release, pain management that cannabis can provide. So they're, number one, curious of a kind of a safer, more familiar delivery form factor, which is beverage, right? There's a ton of, stigma around smoking. So we want to transition from that. So then once we have beverage as, a addressable category, it goes back to Tracy's point in having a reliable, predictable, and most importantly, metered dose. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is we're making that possible through the technology itself. The technology is allowing the consumer to know and to trial, different beverage formats with a level of reliability on exactly how much they're getting. So if it's 8 ounces, there's 10 milligrams in that 8 ounces. They know specifically if they drink half of it, then they're going to get 5 milligrams, and they're going to have an experience around 5 milligrams, and they're going to know, if 5 milligrams is sessionable. Can they have 1? Can they have 2? They're going to get really familiar with that. And that's what we've seen in this past year is people are starting to understand, just about how much works for them. Is it 1? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it more? And then, you have the wines as the start, but then you get really creative and innovative with new product applications. So in this past year, everybody's wanted sparkling water. They're really kind of jumping on that, LaCroix bandwagon or that, and then which then got, developed into, the White Claw bandwagon of, infused seltzer water. Okay. Yeah. That is completely ubiquitous across the whole chain. But then you start to get people that are outside of, traditional wine and traditional beverage, and you look at other spirits, they're starting to come in. Beer manufacturers are starting to ask us not only about cannabinoids, but they want flavor profiles that are very similar to IPAs. So then the question they start to ask is, well, what kind of experience can I create with terpenes? And so terpenes are found in all botanicals, but really prominent and unique in different cannabis strains. Right. So once, and we have now, a kind of predictable metered dose of around, let's call it 5 milligrams of THC, then the curiosity comes, all right, now can I make this experience, not only high, but maybe like energetic with terpenes? Can I use terpenes to make my product taste more like, an IPA or hops or, a Saison or fruit forward? So then you get these really interesting mixes of new flavor profiles that are botanical, that also have, active properties that are uplifting, that could be energetic, that could be sedative. And that's all dependent on kind of the combination of cannabinoids and terpenes and the finished beverage itself. And so there's a lot more research, of course, that needs to go through this, but having these levers to pull to innovate new products is super exciting because it allows us to create a whole new beverage category. It's no longer just, an infused wine. No, this is a cannabis beverage. What House of Saka is delivering is a brand new experience for consumers. And then you see new product manufacturers coming out here that are, de-alcoholizing other type of beverages. So de-alcoholized beers, you infuse that with terpenes, and now you're getting a flavor profile that is similar to an IPA, but no alcohol. And then you can kind of play around with the cannabinoids to create a new experience. If you use THC, that may be energetic and uplifting, but as Tracy was saying earlier, she puts a little bit of CBD in hers. So that's a little bit more mellow. And so now you're kind of tweaking the experience with the actives that you're using. And that's what, kind of keeps driving people to try more. So, on the market now, what you'll continue to see is new cannabinoids come out. There's a couple products that came out just this summer that are using Delta 8 THC. You see a few products that are using THCV, which is supposed to be like skinny weed. So all the high without the munchies. You'll start to see more conversations around terpenes. There's already proven data on the benefits of beta-caryethylene. It's one particular terpene that's found in pepper, but also found in a lot of cannabis strains. You'll start to see more and more conversations and more products come to market that are really focusing on the functional attributes, but are also creating, a new kind of beverage experience as a whole, because we're aligning functionality with taste, with beverage format, and what we hope to achieve throughout all that we're doing here collectively together is to make cannabis beverage a category on its own.
Interesting.
And that's what we're all working towards.
So Tracy, as Austin was going through that, my winery hat sort of popped back on, and I was thinking about a lot of those folks in our audience that are on the winery side that may be looking at this as a consideration. Talk to me a little bit about cost, right? Because you're making the wine, right? So if you're making some, you're starting with some Napa Sauvignon Blanc, then you've got to de-alk it, right? So there's costs there, and then you've got to work with Austin, and then there's costs there that you're layering on, and you held up the bottle, you've got the special closure. So from a costing perspective, is it drastically different to produce a bottle of House of Saka than it would be if you just went forward with the Napa Valley Sauvignon Blanc?
Well, first of all, we don't use Sauvignon Blanc. We use Chardonnay, and we use Rosé Pinot Noir,
okay,
depending on the varietal. No worries. But it really depends, I think, on how you look at it. I mean, winery businesses are super, super capital heavy in the sense that, you have barrels and you have tanks and you have vineyards associated with those. So there's certain costs that are layered in to a wine company that aren't necessarily layered in to ours, because we buy our wine from wineries already made. Okay. So we don't have that capital expense. But that having been said, it is exceedingly expensive to do because we're using such good base wine, combined with the fact that we're buying really expensive glass that then has to be painted, then we have to cork it, and then we have to CR, child resistant, cap it. The labels are expensive. We're using expensive, good, estate aid foiled labels. Right. So yeah, it's way, way more expensive in terms of the raw cost. If you take out capital, if you take out that overhead that exists at any wine company, right. When you remove that and you're just comparing just a regular bill of materials, it's at least 3 times what it would cost to make a bottle of wine. And we're looking at doing House of Saka, just a straight non-alc version for a major retailer. And that cost will be, this retails for $50 a bottle. Our regular de-alc wine will retail for $15. Right. That's a different, and not to mention the taxes. So once this leaves, our hands and gets handed off to a distributor to get to a retailer, which is very much like the 3-tier system in wine currently, except we don't get a PO. We have to collect the money directly from the retailer. But there's another 27% tax that hits the consumer before they even see it. So, this bottle isn't sold to the retailer. It's another 27 with that tax built in. There's another 27% that they have to put on it, and then they take another. And so the margins at the retail side are much bigger too. Right. Whereas standard, if I'm doing a price structure in wine, I'm looking at 33% gross margin is standard in our industry for retail, and 25% margin is standard for distributors. And so you're looking always at around that. Where can I play within those guidelines? With cannabis, everyone is taking pieces of you right. along the way, and everything is twice as expensive. So it's a 50% minimum gross margin at retail. Our distributors are charging us minimum delivery fees that are exorbitant. It's hard to make money. We are, but it's hard to do.
Well, I can imagine that's a real motivator for being able to get that direct consumer channel up and running, right?
Yeah.
And be able to, just like a lot of small wineries, I mean, if it wasn't for their direct business, they wouldn't be in business, right? For a lot of the same reasons you just alluded to. So Tracy, this is, I mean, you must be very passionate about this, right? Because it's nothing easy. There's not one thing you've said or anybody said this is an easy money play, right? It's what drives you?
I think I mean, I've always been a zigger when other people zag personally. So I've always been interested in pushing boundaries and doing things that are truly innovative. And this is true innovation. I mean, every day that Austin wakes up, he's thinking about how can he be more innovative. Every day that Aaron wakes up, he's thinking about how can he be more innovative? How can he make his process even better than it is now? And so it's sort of like this little cabal we have of really innovative, exciting people that we get to work with. And I can say honestly, having been in the wine industry for as long as I have, that, I mean, two of my favorite people ever that I've ever worked with, whether it's in wine or cannabis, have been Aaron and Austin, because they share this passion of pushing boundaries. And for us to be able to create a product that's so beautiful, and bring cannabis into the mainstream, use it as a vehicle to bring cannabis and all the benefits of cannabis into the mainstream with a product that's, between 11 and 16 calories a glass, as opposed to 120 to 160 calories a glass with a regular wine, and all of the benefits that come with cannabis. And also combined with starting a company and being able to create a company culture that you alone can control. So being able to start a company and have the right culture, have the right sort of feeling when you get up in the morning, like knowing that this is what we're in this together. I'm really passionate about it. And I truly, truly feel grateful to work with the people that I get to work with every day, and especially the people on this panel. I mean, and I'm not saying that because they're on this panel. I'm saying that because I genuinely mean it.
So I have one more question for you. Well, I have a couple more questions, a little follow-up to this. As you started to venture down this road, coming out of the wine industry for as many years as you were in it, how would you characterize the reaction that you had from colleagues that you worked with over the years?
You mean in entering the cannabis space?
Yeah.
Well, when I was approached by Cynthia, who's a founder of the company, and she essentially came to me with a brand idea, but no idea sort of how to put it together. I was really excited about the opportunity, but I talked to key people in the industry. I mean, one of my best friends is the CMO at Duckhorn Wine Company. I talked to top recruiters. I talked to, I have a lot of friends in the industry, and they all told me if anyone's going to do, my mentor is the president of Vintage Wine Estates. So I talked to them all, and they're like, if anyone's going to do this, it's going to be you, and you should do it. So that was sort of the reaction. I kind of had almost the opposite reaction, though, from the cannabis side, which was an interesting, and I didn't expect, where it was, I think, when people like myself started moving from standard industries into cannabis, there was a lot of resentment from people that had been in the space and had really worked to create this beautiful plant, and some of whom had, suffered greatly as a result of that.
Right.
And so there was a bit of, sort of rub, against people entering the space and people who have been in the space. And I think just through mutual respect and proving that you're in it to win it and not in it for a money play, you're in it because as heard me say earlier, I genuinely care about what it is that we're doing. I think that has sort of bridged that gap, but it's still there. It's a very real, and I'm sure Aaron and Austin and Evan have experienced that to some degree themselves. But I was surprised about that. That did surprise me. I expected everyone to be all like, holding hands and rainbows and unicorns, and it wasn't like that at all.
Yeah, it's funny when we launched the Wine and Weed Symposium 4 years ago. It was on the heels of voting for legalization of recreational cannabis here in California, and we just felt like it was a topic we needed to address. How are these two industries going to essentially share a neighborhood? And it was interesting. I almost had the opposite sort of reaction. I had a lot of folks on the wine industry especially some of the older, more traditional folks who were sort of questioning what we were doing. And this is something we need to be very concerned about. And on the cannabis side, they were super helpful in trying to help us put together educational panels to help, educate our industry audience, our wine industry audience, on what was happening. But over the next 4 years, is sort of a lot of the fears that I think people had never really came to fruition. Things just feels like they're eroding a little bit, and perhaps there is a place for both these two industries to coexist and maybe even benefit from that. So I'm going to.
And the reality is, we're taking wine. We're buying wine from
right.
wineries, so we're helping with their supply issues.
Right.
So, there's a lot of, we've had how many years now of bumper crops? There's a lot of wine in the market right now. Yeah. So if I was a wine owner, I think of this as a gift, because we're able to leverage use some of that extra supply.
And I certainly think that there are a lot of winery owners out there, principals, who are looking at ways to diversify and take advantage of the potential opportunity here, which is a good segue where I want to kind of go with next. And I'll start with you, Aaron. Just sort of predictions for the future. How do you see the cannabis-infused beverage category evolving over the next couple of years? And again, if you can get specific about wine, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on that, but we'll start with Aaron.
Yeah, so we see really massive growth as this is going to continue to be more accepted by consumers. Because the THC markets, at least for the foreseeable future, are going to be sort of state by state, that's going to grow a lot slower. I think the potential for a mainstream CBD product, and Vertosa does quite a bit of those, that's going to grow a lot faster. But we very specifically see actually de-alkalized wine options growing quite massively, because we look over at Europe, where BevZero's parent company, Contech, services a lot of de-alkalized wine there. When you look at consumption in Europe, I don't quite recall the stats on wine, but on beer, for example, I think about 11 or 12% of all beer sold in Europe is non-alcoholic. Wow. Whereas we're barely 1% here in the US. But we're growing quickly, and we're going to start to match that. Wine's going to grow as well. So I think there's a very significant opportunity for people to diversify and get going on that. And while the regular conventional non-alcoholic with nothing in it might grow a little bit slower, I think it's House of Saka leading the way here in the US.
Interesting. Austin, what do you think? What do you see coming down the pike?
Yeah, to Aaron and Tracy's point, folks are curious, and they're looking for alternatives to alcohol. They're looking for alternatives to smoking, and they're looking generally as a whole towards better for you functional products. And the functional beverage category has grown exponentially year over year since really 2012. And what I foresee is, as really kind of the millennial generation continues to grow older, have families, have kids, they're really focused on high quality products and quality, and paying money for products that are going to give them kind of some benefit, some functional benefit. So cannabis aligns really well for the functionality and also the diversity of that the plant provides. So as mentioned, different cannabinoids all have different effects. Different terpenes have different effects. When you combine them in different ratios, you can really dial in a whole bunch of different functional aspects. So the primary places that we see every day product and brand managers trying to innovate for is pain, sleep, and stress. And so there's already functional elements outside of just cannabis that are addressing those three areas. On the stress and sleep side, you see melatonin, you see L-theanine, you see valerian root. So as people continue to explore all of these kind of more botanical or holistic functional ingredients, they're combining those with cannabinoids to differentiate the product, to boost the product, So I foresee a lot of, more kind of plant-based, holistic, functional ingredients being in different beverages generally, and continuing to ride that kind of similar trend that we're already seeing of like low cal, no cal type of beverages, so that you're getting a whole bunch, more bang for your buck. You're getting like all the experience, new experience, without some of the negative effects of alcohol or sugar.
Right.
And that's where I see this market going and continuing to grow, as we look, forward in this decade.
Evan, what do you have to add to that? I'm sure you've got some thoughts on where you see things going in the near future as well.
Yeah, this has been an exciting conversation just because of the expertise and the years of experience of everyone on this call, not just in cannabis and not just in wine, but in science and research and technology and everything. And it's really interesting to hear everyone's perspectives on it, because it is, for me personally, one of the most unique opportunities that I think we're going to have for a very long time. And it marries a lot of what we're saying right now. And Austin did a great job of just bringing this together in many ways, where he spoke about the ability to create experiences, and the functional beverage space is really doing that. And we're not playing with a singular ingredient or an output of a process like fermentation. We're now working with multiple ingredients and multiple compounds, whether they're cannabinoids or terpenes or other things that we're going to continue to add. And, even in your question about wineries and what the opportunity is there, and Tracy kind of went through that a little bit, but that's all about creating experiences, creating a unique opportunity to either tell a story or bring people through an experience that creates an emotional connection to a brand, primarily, and also the products that those brands may either sell to you or provide to you, whatever that is. And, everyone approaches this space with some level of fear or apprehension.
Right.
In certain cases, rightfully so. There's a significant amount of stigma around the cannabis plant. There has been, many stigmas around the alcohol industry and wine products and other things in general. We have the ability to kind of reset all of that. And we are all storytellers, some more technical, some more emotional. And we are now creating functional beverages that can help us tell stories, create experiences, and engage in new ways that we never were able to before. That endless possibility is scary enough. Right. And it's being done in an industry that is in certain cases technically federally illegal to do so. In other cases, there's some ambiguity when we talk about hemp and hemp-infused beverages because of the regulatory landscape. But to me, this is one of the most exciting times we can live in, and the most exciting intersection of industries we can be a part of. And I think for all of us, it could be a very personal experience, and that's what is so fun about it. And for me in particular, beverage is an easy way for me to engage with family members who may have been, former smokers who quit. And I don't want to see them picking up a joint and getting back to a behavior that I think is very detrimental, not only for them, but everyone around them. Yeah. A beverage is an easy form for me to share that experience with a family member who probably needs to relax a little bit at the end of the day, or maybe wants to be a little more creative in whatever it is that they're doing. Right. And I think that future is exceptionally bright. It is that intersection. It is, to Austin's point, this exponentially growing functional, plant-based, better for you beverage. Ultimately, that will drive, taking consumer behaviors the way they are, and drive opportunities for those that are willing to experience and approach change in a way that is not fearful, but is exciting. And they are the same, feeling, essentially, is how you then take that and do something with it. And I'm excited for all types of beverage products, whether they be wine-based and not just saying we have the best Pinot Noir in all of California, but we have the best Pinot Noir based functional, suite of beverages in the world. And what can that look like? And,
Right.
it's been great working with everyone on this call and more so with Tracy's partner than Tracy directly, but even with Aaron and for me, learning about wine in the way that I'm not a wine connoisseur, but the technical nature of understanding how wine is produced and how it's fermented. And then even more importantly, once you're starting to de-alcoholize that, there are certain things that may break down that base product entirely. And now we have to rebuild it. And how do we do that? And to me, that's all part of this process. And that's all about innovation and curiosity and storytelling and having that experience. So super excited. I know there's going to be tremendous growth. There's going to be a lot of headwinds to get there, but also for winemakers in particular who are willing to take that chance and work with people like those on this panel. I think it's just an exciting opportunity to engage the consumers that you already have and bring them another experience that you can relate to either your existing brand and your existing winery or tasting room and restaurant environment. And really, to me, and I've said this since I got into the industry, 6 years ago, this is all about hospitality. It's about how we treat and care for others and what we want them to experience and doing that on a daily basis. And that's what we have the ability to do. And we're seeing that movement towards this all-encompassing, well-designed and thoughtful experience. And infused functional beverages, especially wine, is going to be a really big part of that going forward.
So I guess because you guys work so closely together, if any winery in our audience that maybe is interested in learning more, of course, we've got all your contact information available, but they could contact, either Austin, Aaron, or you, Evan, right? In terms of, hey, I've got this idea and where do I get started from here? So I want to make sure I communicate that to our audience. Just as we get ready to wrap things up here, Tracy, where could people get House of Sake? If they want to try, how do they get it? Do they contact you, the website directly, or?
They can absolutely go to houseofsake.com and have it delivered to the door. We're currently covered in 92% of available market in California through our delivery mechanisms. And then also you can buy it at California dispensaries. You can go to a list on our website to see those.
You've got like a mailing list or something? People could join your mailing list and get updates on what's going on? Excellent. Well, then I encourage people to do that. I just want to thank you guys so much for your time today. This has been a really interesting discussion. For those of you in our audience, thank you for joining us. You'll get the opportunity to watch the replay of this as well. We didn't have time to get to a lot of other questions, but please submit those questions. And as part of our follow-up, we'll make sure that we get you the answers that you're looking for. Panelists, thanks again for your time today. And, it'll be interesting to get together maybe a year from now and sort of see how things have evolved since then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye, guys. Good to see you.
Bye.
Good seeing y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Cheers.